I'm gonna tell you the inspo on where the talk came from. So a little bit about myself. My name is Dara Mystery. I am a fractional HR leader and an executive leadership coach. I've been in corporate for 15 years. And then, let's see, about 18 months ago, I got fired. Woo, I know, it's okay, I'm fine. Fired because I wouldn't play the games. I was, with the mean girl energy. I was with the boys club and nobody at the table looked like me. So, that was threatening, typical, used to it, nothing new. So yeah, I was fired, it was embarrassing. I was like, WTF, like what happened? And it was so cute how they fired me. They're like, oh, but we love you, but it's just not a cultural fit. I was like, oh, because I operate with honesty, integrity, and I'm actually doing my job. I was like, okay, that's fine. Because they wanted me to like sweep under the rug and pay people off. And I was like, we got morals, we don't do that. Like, that's not gonna work. So anyways, we parted ways. But that led me to become a full-time entrepreneur, and that was awesome. But I'm a corporate girly, like that's my bread and butter, like that's what I know. And so transitioning full-time entrepreneurship, that was learning. And so my talk actually is from that. I hired a business coach because it took me about 9 months before I landed my first client. And I was like, I'm doing something wrong, I'm amazing, like why not? And my business coach, she said, record all your discovery calls and, send them to me. So I started recording them and I sent them. And she goes, do you know how discovery calls work? I was like, yeah, they discover me, I discover them, we sign the contract, I get paid, like that's what it's about. She goes, sure, but she goes, they have to really understand like what you're gonna do for them. And I was like, fair, I get that. But when she said, when I was listening to your discovery call, she goes, why do you talk a lot? I was like, I was a little offended. I was like, that's kind of rude. She goes, you're constantly proving yourself. She's like, did you even listen to your client? She's like, I hear you the whole time showing your creds, what you're about, what you're worth, and you're just constantly, trying to explain to them why they picked you. She's like, girlfriend, they got on the call because they wanted you. Like, now it's time for you to stay calm, be collected, and listen, and then figure out how you're gonna help them. And that really struck a chord with me, because I was like, that is true. Like, we got the call. I didn't make them book the call, right? They obviously booked it with me. And so that makes sense. But again, I'm over here like, oh, I'm Dara Mystery, I've been in corporate for this year, I was an executive, I did this, I did that, just et cetera, constantly trying to prove my credentials, but not just living in my expertise, because obviously they showed up and they wanted to work with me for a reason. But that can be disgusting, because they're gonna be like, okay, I think she's working too hard. So that made sense. So I took my business coach's advice and I stopped trying to prove myself. I would listen on the call and let them share their insights, and we would just talk about the solution that I would bring. And ironically, they just started trickling in and the clients started to come. And then I met more entrepreneurs and they were in the same boat. And they're just like, they're sharing, they're like, well, I have a doctorate, I have a master's, I have this, I have that, but it's still hard. And not that I'm a business coach expert at that time. And I was like, oh, well, let's talk about your discovery call. And again, that was a pattern I noticed. We, as the business, are spending more time trying to prove ourselves and saying why they should work with us, when in fact, they made the call to work with us well before, and we just needed to figure out the arrangement. That was it. And so therefore, I realized there's a hidden, invisible proof tax that majority of us, if not all of us, are paying constantly. So now we'll get to the talk, and it's called the proof tax. And Lakeisha might be like, you might be talking kind of, contradictory to what I'm saying, but it'll all make sense at the end. So let's talk about burnout, and let's be real. You're not burned out because you work too hard. That's actually not true at all. You're burned out because you've been paying the tax that was never yours to owe. Now I want you guys to sit with us for a little bit, because I know some of you probably are thinking, I get that, right? We're constantly working to prove ourselves in every single room. But today we're giving it a name. It's called the proof tax. And every single person who built something from scratch, who walked into spaces where people looked at you a half a second too long, who smiled through the doubt, and then went home and worked twice as hard to make sure that nobody would question you, we've been paying a tax. And what that tax cost us is just everything, from revenue to our peace of mind to scaling our businesses. We're constantly paying it. But here's what nobody tells you about entrepreneurship. When you come from a community that was never assumed the default in any boardroom, any investment meeting, or ever seen as a thought leader, that gets in your head. You just didn't build a business at this point. You started acting in a defense mechanism. Before you sent your first invoice, before you built your first order, before you had your first offer, before that single client, the world already rendered a verdict on us. Not based on our skills, not based on our ideas, not based on anything that's truly material, but based on what we look like, where we came from, and what our name sounded like on a resume. And so we built a business in a response to that. And not from desire, but more from defiance. So every yes became just a proving point in our collateral of successes. Every client became a case study. Every stage, every feature, every award just became one more, yes, we are worthy. But here's the thing about running your own business, it's like a courtroom. And I need you to really lock in on this, because I believe everyone here agrees, you're not only just a lawyer, but you're acting as a defendant as well. You're simultaneously trying to win the case while you're trying to prove that you even deserve to be there. And that's not a business strategy, guys. That's just exhaustion with a logo. So the proof tax comes up in 3 stages. And I want you guys all to be honest with yourself on what stage you're in. I've been in all of them. The first one, stage 1, the overqualification loop. This is you're saying yes to clients, rooms, opportunities that you've outgrown, not because they don't serve you, not because they will move your business forward, but if you say no to them, it feels like you're shrinking and you're turning them down. And then you're starting to wonder, am I being arrogant? Am I forgetting where I came from? Am I getting too cocky? Let me be clear, in entrepreneurship, there's growth. And if you're feeling that way, it has nothing to do with that. It just means you've outgrown your worth and you've outgrown your wound, and it's time to build more. The overqualification loop is when your business decisions are still being made by a version of you that needed to prove something. That version of you that worked incredibly hard, that version of you that got you here, but that version of you is not qualified to lead you in your next chapter. Because the compass is set to acceptable in the beginning, and now it needs to be focused on alignment. So if you know you're in the loop when you finish a client engagement and you think, I'm glad this was great and they loved it, but I'm not doing that again. And then 6 months, you sign a client in a similar situation. That's not a mistake, that's you paying your tax. Stage 2, the wrong room problem. The second stage is a little bit more subtle, but it actually costs a little bit more. You keep ending up with clients who drain you. Guilty. Have you guys had clients that drain you? Oof, I know. Clients who undervalue you, clients who nickel and dime your proposals, and still expect Beyonce level results, but they don't want to pay the price. And every time this happens, at the end, you're like, I did it again. I signed that client. And I'll tell you this, what you're doing is just scarcity dressed up as ambition. You needed the win more than you needed the fit. And when you're operating from scarcity, you'll rationalize almost any red flag and turn it into an amber or a yellow. The client who pushed on your rate 3 times before signing. We've all had those. You've told yourself they needed to see the value, it's fine. Or the opportunity that paid less than you're worth, but it came with visibility. And you told yourself exposure, that's also currency. Which, don't get me wrong, in many cases it can be, but not all, so it's okay to push back. When you're making those decisions to quiet that voice that says, what if nothing comes? That's also not strategy. That's the proof tax asking you for another payment. The wrong room problem is what happens when the fear of being overlooked becomes more powerful than your standards for being chosen. Stage 3, the burnout bill. By the time you feel it, you've been paying the tax for years. And here's what's inside about burnout for entrepreneurs, especially us. It doesn't look like a collapse. It looks like productivity. It looks like, I'm just tired, I'm just gonna rest after this launch, no big deal, we'll be fine. It looks like a full calendar, but again, it's fine, like we'll be okay. The burnout bill comes due when your body finally stops negotiating with your calendar. And I wanna say something that might be a little uncomfortable. The soft reset that everyone talks about, the vacation, the retreat, the digital detox, the spa day, that's all just a pause. But a pause is also not a reset. The real reset is in the moment when you fire yourself from your own worst client. The moment you stop accepting conditions from yourself that you would never accept from an external client. The moment you look at your own business and ask, if I were consulting this company, what's the first thing I would tell this founder to do? But then you have to have the courage to do it. Woo. I want to offer you a shift in perspective that I've seen change how people build. And the proof tax exists because somewhere along the way, you've internalized the idea that your seat at the table had to be earned. Every quarter, every engagement, every time you walked into a room. And here's what I want you to take home with you today. You don't have to earn your seat at the table anymore. You've built the table. Lakeisha is a great example of that, right? And that's not arrogance, that's just accounting. You've done the work, you've paid the actual dues, not the false tax. The real dues, the late nights, the failed launches, the clients who ghosted, the invoices that came back disputed. You have earned your expertise. The reset is not about doing less, it's about choosing differently. It's the shift from reacting to the verdict to operating from your own criteria, from will they accept me to do I even accept them? From I need to show them to I'm just gonna show up. This is not a mindset trick, it's just material on how you build, how you price, and who you serve. I'm gonna leave you with something practical because I believe insight without application is just a really cute Instagram caption or a TikTok reel. So before you say yes to any client, any opportunity in the room, I want you to run a 3-second yes audit. 3 questions that honestly you have to be really genuine and answer truthfully. Question 1. Am I saying yes from desire or defiance? Question 2. Would I actually say yes if nobody else was watching? Question 3. Does this move my business forward or just my ego? And if you can't answer all of them truthfully, it should be a hard no. And that's it. 3 questions, 3 seconds, a decision made for you that is not gonna cost you anything. I would recommend putting those down and thinking about it before your next discovery call where you keep yapping too much. And I want to end with this, and not talking at anyone, but we're going to do a quick little exercise. I want you to look at your neighbor or someone that you see and say these words. I have been paying a tax that was never mine to owe.
I have been paying tax that was never mine to owe.
No, say it a little bit louder. I have been paying a tax that was never mine to owe. I feel it. I feel it in the room. What you just felt is that release, that recognition, that soft reset beginning in real time. It's not a spa day, not the after the next launch. It's right here, right now in this room with people who have been paying the same tax without knowing they had a name. You came into this conference as entrepreneurs, and I want you to leave as choosers. As founders who operate from alignment, not just from evidence, and as people who have officially started doing that today. Stop auditing themselves for a verdict that was never fair to begin with. The proof tax is real, and starting right now, you guys are all exempt. Thank you guys.